Hello and welcome to Self-Power Now, where empowering women share their stories and advice about life, work, happiness, love, and success. I'm your host, Debbie Gisonni, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. So sit back and enjoy the show. In today's podcast, I'm going to talk about a topic I often write and present about, and one I feel is extremely important to everyone these days, and that is how to reboot your life so that you can bring more happiness, peace, and love into it. There's also a video slide presentation that goes along with this podcast, and if you want to have both video and audio, go to the YouTube link for this episode. If you're only listening to the audio, you'll notice that there are some slight pauses as slides are advanced. Don't we all have times in our lives when you wish you could just hit that refresh button and leave the past behind? Hello, pandemic. Or even if the pandemic didn't throw you for a loop, you might be dealing with other life stresses, work burnout, or challenges. And when that happens, it usually creates a longing for change. And whenever you want change in your life, it's important to ask yourself, what exactly is it that you want to change or improve in your life? Whenever I ask people that question, I usually get one of four answers, because once our basic needs are met in life, we all really want the same things. First and foremost, we want to be happy and healthy. Those are givens and always the top two answers. And don't we also want to be loved? Although I call that a secret desire because most people don't openly admit this, even though we spend our lives seeking approval and love from multiple sources: our parents, our kids, our bosses, our friends. The fourth common answer is peace, or to put it more commonly, less stress. Everyone wants a little more peace and a little less stress in life. Now, maybe your first answer was not to be happy, healthy, loved, or peaceful, but maybe something like to have more money or greater success. But think about that. Why do you want more money or greater success? Well, it usually comes down to the fact that you think money and success will make you feel happier, healthier, more loved, or less stressed. So most desires in life inevitably circle back to those four basic desires, which are usually why people want to reboot in the first place. And of course, in order to pursue and achieve those desires, you need to feel empowered. The thing is, for most of us, that feeling of empowerment seems to come and go depending on your external circumstances, which is ironic because that's exactly what you're trying to change. For example, when things aren't going the way you'd like in life, you feel powerless. And on the contrary, when things are going well, you feel very empowered. I don't know about you, but there were times in my life when I felt more empowered as a child than I have as an adult. I remember the first time I truly felt powerless in my life. Weirdly enough, it was during a very successful time in my corporate career when I was in magazine publishing for the tech industry during my late 20s to early 30s. All of a sudden, life just interrupted my plans, so to speak. Don't you hate it when that happens? Anyway, I had risen to the top rank in my field, which was the role of publisher. Not easy to achieve since I was a very young woman in an industry that was very male dominated at the time. I had the executive pay, the stock options, the title, the status, all the success I ever dreamed of. But then a series of events happened that put me on a continuing spiral of death, dying, and illness in my family. First, my mother got a brain tumor, which left her permanently disabled and in need of 24/7 care. Then my younger sister took her own life at only 23 years old. A month later, my father got bone cancer. And then my aunt, whom I lived with at the time, got breast cancer. All four of these people, my mother, father, aunt, and sister, died within a consecutive 4-year period. Talk about feeling powerless. Needless to say, I was anything but happy or healthy or loving or peaceful with all that stress, even though I was very successful looking from the outside. It took a couple of years after that for me to realize that I needed a major reboot in my life, or I would continue down a very dark, self-destructive path. I was also getting lots of signs that I needed to change. First, from my body. I traveled a lot and I was getting sick and run down all the time. My work, which I once loved, didn't seem to excite me anymore. In fact, nothing seemed to matter anymore. Death has a way of putting those kinds of things that we thought were so important in perspective. Since my high-level, high-stress job was all-consuming and I didn't have a lot of coping skills to manage my stress at the time, I felt like I needed a radical change. So I took advantage of a reorganization in my company and decided to leave my job, much to the surprise of all my colleagues, friends, and family. They all thought I was crazy. But I knew that for me, I needed to completely get off that treadmill in order to allow myself the time and space to figure out what my next step in life was. And it ended up changing the direction of my life and career forever. I'll get to that a little later. Now, that was a huge reboot for me, but all reboots don't have to be that big. I'm certainly not saying that you need to leave your job to reboot your life and be happier or healthier or less stressed. Life is a series of ups and downs, some tragic and some trivial. Some challenges may require just a few adjustments to get to the other side. Others may require more drastic change. That's why reboots are so important. They help you move through any challenge, no matter how serious. But how do you do it? Where do you start? Well, from the inside out. In order to change your outer world, you have to first change your inner world. Why? Because that's where your true power is. The number one mistake I made that caused me the most suffering during the time of my family tragedies was thinking that my power and hence happiness came from what was happening in my outer world. And they don't, or at least they shouldn't. No matter how restrictive or challenging your outer world may be, your true source of power is within you. It's like a pilot light on a stove that never goes out. What you decide to cook or the choices you decide to make on that stove is the outer manifestation of that power within. So first, you have to connect with that inner power or strength that's always within you. And that requires three things that are all interrelated: self-awareness, self-love, and self-surrender. Let's talk about each of these. First, self-awareness. Self-awareness is important to any reboot because it helps you connect to the inner power you need to create change. Of course, the modern dilemma we have is that we spend 110% of our time focused on our outer world when self-awareness is about our inner world. One of the ways to cultivate self-awareness is by quieting the mind. That helps you connect and listen to your heart instead of your head. I know, easier said than done. But things like meditation, listening to soothing music, praying, focusing on your breath, doing mantras, they all help quiet the mind, especially that pesky little voice in your head that never shuts down. Now, I already know what you might be thinking, especially if you're a type A person like I've always been, that you have no time to quiet your mind. And even if you had the time, you could never meditate. It's not for you. Well, I thought the same thing. And I'm here to tell you, anyone can learn to quiet the mind for a few minutes a day. And you'll see so many benefits from it beyond just reducing stress to things like increasing your immunity, improving sleep, and gaining mental clarity, to name a few, which, by the way, are all essential things needed for a reboot. Also important to know is that meditation doesn't have to be sitting cross-legged and chanting Om. As I mentioned, it could take other forms. For me, after I left my corporate job, I started reading a lot about meditation because I wanted to learn how to untangle years of stress on my body, mind, and spirit. I was really stuck. At first, I could only listen to guided meditations to quiet down. After a while, I learned how to be quiet just listening to music. Eventually, I could sit in silence without any distractions. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. Even after all these years, I sometimes can't stop my monkey mind. But just like yoga, it's a practice. You have to be gentle with yourself and also willing to learn. In fact, you can give yourself a mini reboot from stress every single day just by sitting silently for 10 minutes. Here's a simple exercise you can do. Sit in a quiet room, pick an object in that room, and focus on that and only that for about 10 minutes. If your mind wanders, that's okay. Just keep bringing it back to that object. For example, if the object is a chair, notice everything about that chair: the color, the grain of wood, the shape, the texture of the fabric, the legs. Believe it or not, this kind of focus helps you learn how to quiet your mind. I mentioned that when I started meditating, I listened to a lot of guided meditations. There are so many of these kinds of meditations that you can access these days, either through phone apps or the internet or YouTube. And if you're interested, I have a free guided meditation that you can download from my site. I'll give you the specifics on that a little later. Self awareness also has a twin outer part. It's called play. You might be thinking, how the heck does playing give you more self awareness? It seems the opposite of meditating, but it's really just the other side of the same coin. Both help you connect to your real self, and both help turn off that constant chatter in your mind. Children are not the only ones who need to play. Think about what you love to do as a child or even an adult. It's usually something creative or physical that makes you lose track of time and thoughts, like painting or riding a horse or taking a walk in nature or playing a sport. I'm sure you've heard the term runner's high, right? That's what this is about: doing something fun that feeds your soul and stops the monkey mind. Now, if you're like me, that type A personality, playing, just like meditating, may not come easy to you. I always felt like I couldn't play until all my work was done. That probably came from my childhood upbringing. But as I'm sure you know, the work never gets done and then you never get to play. When I used to attend tech conferences while all my colleagues were out partying in the evening, I was in my hotel room prepping my work for the next day, and it never ended. But after I left my corporate job and started to see how beneficial lightening up was to my spirit, I started playing more. One of the things I did was buy a giant trampoline for my backyard. I have to preface this by saying I have no children, only dogs. I always wanted my own trampoline. Until this day, I still love jumping on it. And when guests come over, I invite them to try it out. As soon as they start jumping, they start laughing and giggling like a kid. Why? Because it's fun and it connects them to their inner child, their inner spirit. I also did other things just for fun. For example, I started painting. I never painted in my life. I even took belly dancing lessons. When you do things that make you happy, it's like putting a great big smile on your heart, and it helps you learn more about yourself, hence self-awareness. The next area to explore for rebooting your life is self-love. I think self-love is the most important lesson we're here to learn, and definitely necessary for success in anything you do in life. Self-love allows you to show up in the world with confidence and a belief that you can change anything in your life, especially if you're making a decision that may not be supported by your friends or family, like I did when I left my corporate job, or when I moved clear across the country, or when I eloped instead of having a big fat Italian wedding. That didn't go over well with my family. Anyway, when it comes to self love, most of us are our own worst enemies because we look for love from the outer world for validation, from our looks or status or job or car. None of those are ever consistent. I'm sure you've had times in your life where you either loved yourself or hated yourself, depending on your outer circumstances. But when you look beyond the outer world and go within, you find the real you. Remember that pilot light I spoke about that is always on? That's your true essence and power, your energy. And unlike your outer circumstances, it never changes, which is a good reason why it's worthy of your love. It never lets you down. You might have to rediscover self-love many times during your life. Here again, it takes self-awareness to get there, just as I've already spoken about. For some people, the journey to self-love could take a lot of inner work and perhaps even therapy. I've always had a pretty good appreciation of myself all my life, but when I lost my sister to suicide, I was dealing with a lot of self-guilt and self-hate, which for me were entirely new emotions. I felt responsible in some way, and I also hated myself for not seeing any of the signs. I knew I wasn't going to get to the other side of my pain on my own. So I saw a grief therapist for several months who helped me through it. There are also some simple outer actions you can take that will get you closer to self-love. One is just to start treating yourself better. The best way to do this is to start treating yourself as you would a beloved cat or dog, or if you don't like pets, substitute a child in there. Imagine what it would be like if you treated yourself like you treat your dog. You'd give yourself lots of love, feed yourself good food and clean water, take breaks to exercise and play, and you'd never say anything negative about yourself. Think about how many times a day you think or say something negative about yourself, or tell yourself you're not good enough or smart enough or thin enough. Start recognizing when you put yourself down, either verbally or not mentally, and replace that negative criticism with positive adjectives about yourself. Even if you don't believe them yet, eventually they'll sink in. For example, if you're thinking, my thighs are getting way too fat, immediately change the narrative to, I have a unique body and these thighs have served me well. Thank you, thighs. Or refocus your narrative to something positive about yourself, like, I'm a loyal, kind, and loving person. Another easy step you can take towards self-love is self-care. This is especially important for women because women naturally take care of everyone else in their lives. The problem with that is if you spend all your time taking care of others, you'll have nothing left for yourself, and you won't be any good for others either. It's okay to take care of your loved ones, but leave some space for yourself, whether that's, 30 minutes of exercise a day, getting your hair done, or taking a warm bubble bath. These things are not only pleasurable, but also necessary for your well-being on so many levels, and extremely important to combat stress and burnout. And guess what? By taking care of yourself, you'll be a better parent, boss, colleague, or friend. And here again, better able to make the difficult decisions you might be thinking about in order to reboot your life. The last key area for a reboot is self-surrender. Now, the word surrender has a bit of a bad reputation because people think it means to give up your power, but it's not. You can't give up power you never had in the first place. Let me explain. In self-awareness and self-love, The self I'm referring to is your true self, your inner power. Some people might call this your higher self or spirit. In the case of self surrender, however, the self I'm referring to is your small self, or otherwise known as your ego. That's what you're surrendering. It's that pesky little critical negative voice in your head that tries to control your life, but really has no power to do so, not unless you give it power. And each time things don't go the way it wants, it causes you much suffering and unhappiness. That voice in your head is not the real you. It's just your mind creating havoc in your life. Look, we all want to be in control of our life, but there are some plans in life we have no control over. At those times, the only thing we can do is surrender to the situation and control how we react to what's happening. Look at COVID. During that time, we saw many people making the best out of a bad situation. I remember watching a video of people in Italy during lockdown singing love songs from their balconies. That showed incredible surrender to the situation, but also a lot of strength and hope at the same time. During the time I was going through my family tragedies, I so wanted to control the outcome or even understand the why of it all. I used to go back through the events in my head to see if there was something else I could have done to fix things, which you know is impossible because you can't go back in time and change anything. By going back over things like that in your head, you're keeping yourself in the past, lamenting about the past and also worrying about the future, which we do a lot of, creates suffering because you have no control over either, and it keeps you stuck. The only place where you're truly in control is in the present moment, right here, right now. That doesn't mean you don't make plans or have goals. It just means you're not attached to them and that you're open to other ways of achieving them or going in a completely different direction if that's where life is pointing you. By surrendering control that you didn't really have in the first place, you're making a choice to go with the flow of life, not against it. That in itself is truly empowering. It's trusting that life is taking you exactly where you need to be at exactly the right time. Think of life like a river. Rivers only flow in one direction, right? When you spend your time rowing upstream against the flow, you suffer. When you try to stop the flow of the river, you suffer. When you try to turn right when the river is going left, you suffer. Life gets so much easier and happier if you go with the flow, even though you might not know where it's taking you. If you want to reboot your life and be happier, you've got to be okay to go in the direction life is pointing you towards without knowing the reasons and answers for everything. Only then can you continue to move forward, which is required for any reboot. In order to move beyond the obstacles, and I'll go back to my river analogy, you have to be a twig in the river, not a stick in the mud. Here again, this might take some practice and time, paying attention to what your higher self, not your small self, is telling you. Just be sure to give yourself compassion and love throughout the process. I want to share some of my own big reboot results with you. Earlier, I mentioned that after I left my corporate job, my life and career changed forever. I didn't have a plan when I left my job, which might not have been the best thing. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I had to do something different. So I did the things I've been suggesting. I started learning how to be quiet and meditate so that I could listen to what my spirit was telling me. I also played and danced and cooked, all the things that bring me joy. All of that helped me to reconnect to my inner power, which I felt I had lost somewhere along the line. And yes, it did change my career too. I ended up writing 3 books, all with a self-empowerment theme. One about finding happiness, one about overcoming tragedy, and the third about self-love. I still continued to do business consulting and leadership, but I also created a parallel career as a self-empowerment author, speaker, and teacher. I eventually got certified in hypnotherapy and life coaching to enhance my work. When COVID came, I had another little reboot. Like many people, I got that feeling of being powerless again, except this time it wasn't my first rodeo getting sideswiped by life. By now, I had done enough inner work and developed a lot of skills to manage stress and uncertainty. In fact, I was really excited not to have anything to do or anyone to see or any place to go for a while. I had just finished a very grueling and all-consuming corporate assignment, and I really needed to get back into my inner groove, so to speak. So I did just that. I spent a lot of time meditating and playing again. And again, I started writing, which has always been my creative outlet. Ironically, 9 months after lockdown, I birthed a new idea. I knew people and employees were going to need new coping tools during and post-COVID, and that the ways we consume information were changing forever. So I created a series of 4 digital on-demand courses called Self-Power Now to help people be happy, healthy, peaceful, and loved, which, as I spoke about at the beginning, are the things we all want in life and from a reboot. Here's my one commercial line. The courses are available to both individuals and companies for their employees. You can learn more about them or my books on my site, selfpowernow.com, or just email me at debbie@selfpowernow.com. By the way, I mentioned earlier that I had a free guided meditation for you. If you go to my site, selfpowernow.com, and click on free gifts, you can download 3 free happiness gifts. One of those is a guided nature meditation. It's only about 10 minutes long, and it's encoded with special binaural beats that promote a theta brain wave state. That's how you feel right before you fall asleep at night, and it's also when your mind is most conducive and most relaxed in accepting positive change. So, to sum up, in order to reboot your life, you first need to feel empowered to do so. And in order to feel empowered, you need to connect to your power source, which, by the way, is always there. Just like that pilot light on a stove or your power source on your computer. When you reboot your computer, you're not adding a power source. It's already there. You're just restarting it. Self-awareness, self-love, and self-surrender all help you access that power source and get to a happier, healthier, and more loving and peaceful state, all of which create positive change. If you remember one thing, it's that you are more powerful than you can ever imagine. You came in with that power. No batteries necessary. To access it, all you need to do first is remember the power is always there, waiting for you, and then use it to reboot your life. Thank you so much for being here with me today. As I mentioned, you can find more tools to reboot your life, such as books, meditations, and courses on my website, selfpowernow.com. Until next time, this is Debbie Gisonni wishing you a happy, healthy, peaceful, and loving life. Thanks for listening to Self-Power Now. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with others, follow it on your favorite podcast platform, and join our community on selfpowernow.com and receive 3 free happiness gifts. And while you're there, if you're looking for more ways to be happy, healthy, peaceful, and loved, check out my books and new online courses. Until next time, this is Debbie Gisonni wishing you self-power now.